because it was working a second ago.
And now, check. There's the microphone. Now it's working. We'll just do that intro all over again now that you guys are here. What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on this live stream about Blackmagic versus Sony, truths for solo shooters. I know that many of the people who watch this channel are solo shooters, not everybody, but there's a lot of solo shooters out there. We solo shoot sometimes too. And so thinking through how and when do we choose which camera package, that is what we're talking about on this video. I want to talk about the trade-offs and the things that you have to think about when you're picking Blackmagic versus Sony. So we can use a small Sony wireless like the mirrorless. We can use a small Sony mirrorless like the FX3, which is a very small and tidy package. Or we can bring out the URSA Cine 12K LF, which is a beast of a cinema camera. And yeah, I mean, in my opinion, one of the best sensors in the world. So this thing is just a beast, and it's heavy. So how and when do we choose using these different cameras on different projects? What is the tool that lets us make that decision? And what do we think about as we're doing that? So who are we talking to in this video? Let me just clarify that. We're talking to solo shooters. So this video is not for you if you're working with a crew of 5 people or 10 people or even a crew of 2 people. This video is for solo shooters. Now, what do solo shooters typically do? Now, a solo shooter can do anything. I mean, you can have a solo shooter who's making a movie, who's filming a big commercial, who is like doing all kinds of, like, just because you're solo doesn't mean you're not doing a good big project. Typically, solo shooters are doing corporate videos. Solo shooters are doing the, corporate videos, events, maybe weddings. I know a lot of people love to hate on weddings, so maybe not doing weddings, but doing all kinds of things like that. So I'm talking to solo shooters. You might be doing a lot of different types of videos, but the key is you're a solo shooter. So does that mean, straight up, does that mean you should not use a Blackmagic camera? No. Solo shooters should only use Sony cameras. No, that's not true. So let's kind of jump in and talk about it. Now, the obvious thing to talk about here, right, is the rig, weight, balance. Are you getting tired over the day? Things like that. Now, if you've got a Sony FX3, it's easy to shoot with this handheld. You can put it on the gimbal, you can put it on a tripod, monopod, slider, all kinds of things. And you can use it lots of different ways. Now, some people like to shoot with it tiny. Some people like to rig it up. I mean, you can make this thing as big as an URSA Cine. Yeah. Okay, hey, I'm DeBrown. Thanks for jumping in here. That is what you can do with a camera like this. Now, you can also use one of these solo, and you can run around with an URSA Cine. Now, you're not going to want to carry this thing because it's very heavy. You're going to want an easy rig, or you're going to want to put it on a tripod or a monopod or something. You're also not going to be running around with this thing on a gimbal all day unless you've got that gimbal on a ready rig or something. So when you have a bigger, heavier camera, you have to think about, how am I moving this camera? What am I doing with this camera? So the size and weight of your rig will affect how you shoot. So as you're going to approach a day, you want to think about that. Another major thing to think about is autofocus. Or I should just say focus. Is it auto? Is it manual, right? Now, autofocus, yay. Sony cameras, got it. And plenty of other cameras too. We use Sony, we use Blackmagic, so that's what I'm talking about. But when I talk about, Sony camera, really, you could have a Lumix, you could have a Sony, you could have a Canon, you could have any mirrorless camera. They all qualify, right? We use Sony and Blackmagic, so that's what I'm talking about. The thing to think about with a mirrorless camera versus a cinema camera, right? So cinema cameras are going to be Blackmagic, Red, Arri, etc. Like as filmmakers, we usually know what we're talking about when we say cinema camera. Cinema cameras are usually bigger, they're heavier, they're designed for cinema. Usually, these cameras do not have things like autofocus or auto white balance or auto anything. Usually these cameras are 100% manual. Now, I mean, yes, cameras might have some auto settings, but like it's not like an FX3, right? These cameras are designed to be worked around crews. They're designed to be worked on a cinema set, in a cinema environment. In a cinema environment, everything is manual and everything is a decision that you're making throughout the day. Now, you know, if you're, let's just say, a wedding videographer running around with an FX3, you're still making decisions all day long. But the difference is the decisions you make as, say, a wedding or event videographer, or a run and gun corporate, you know, filmmaker, like it's all the same skill set, right? You're deciding, okay, where am I at on my zoom lens? I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. And how close do I get? And what f-stop? You know, like typically you're going to set your f-stop, you're going to set your, you know, stuff, and you're cranking something, right? You're cranking shutter, you're cranking your ISO, you're cranking, you know, a V&D, whatever it is, you're cranking something to control your exposure, and you're changing your framing. And usually those are the sorts of decisions you're making. You might have the camera on auto white balance. You might be setting, you know, white balance manually. But the point is you're moving quickly and you're making lots of decisions fast on the fly. And the gear is just this, go. That's something to think about when you move to any cinema camera, like this guy. It could be a Pixis. It could be, you know, I didn't grab my my pocket 6K that I have on the shelf from Blackmagic either. You know, like they're smaller versions of cinema cameras, but all of these cinema cameras, what they have in common is they're usually shooting either a flavor of RAW or they're shooting, you know, a very high quality codec of some kind. Whereas cameras like this are usually shooting some flavor of, you know, H.264, H.265. They're not shooting a RAW format typically. Now, of course, you can get like a Nikon ZR and then you can get all of those things, but typically, you know, with that form factor, that's what you're seeing. Hey, QVision Media, thanks for popping in. So when you are deciding which of these cameras to use, think about how those things affect the way you're going to shoot. How heavy is it? How are you going to move it? How are you going to use it? Think about things like focus. Is it automatic focus? Is it manual focus? Is the exposure, is the white balance manual, auto? How does that impact the way that you're going to shoot? So like for us, if we're shooting, you know, we have a separate brand for weddings, Evermore Films. And so if we're doing a wedding, typically I'll take the FX3, I'll put it in auto white balance. I know. I'll put it in auto white balance. I control exposure manually always, no matter what camera I'm using. And I will either crank the shutter or put an ND on and just change the ND. And so that's what we'll do at a wedding because it's all about moving quickly. Now you can argue the same, you know, approach for a documentary, for a, you know, corporate video, for, you know, all kinds of run and gun type situations. And I find that for me on a, you know, 8-10 hour day, if I'm running around getting a whole lot of shots very fast, I love having a camera like this. Very easy. I never get tired and I never have to think about what is the tool doing. I can just say, get it. And I'm just focused on getting the shots and knowing I have what I need and I don't have to stop and think, okay, I need to have the proper, you know, 180 degree shutter rule. So I need to set my ND to this. I can just be like, cool, go. Obviously we try to maintain shutter, you know, 180 shutter degree angle and try to use, you know, ND, you know, V&D filters or whatever, all that stuff. Like I'm not trying to do a bad job here, but my point is it's a different goal and a different outcome. Here is the other dirty secret about mirrorless cameras versus cinema cameras. Sony versus Blackmagic, Arri, Red, pick a cinema camera. The dirty little secret is the image you get out of this FX3 and the image you get out of this URSA Cine 12K is not massively different. Don't yell at me. When you're talking to an end client, and this end client is paying you less than $50,000, they probably could not tell the difference between those two cameras if you put the two images on screen and was like, hey, which of these is the expensive cinema camera? They couldn't tell you, provided everything was matched, right? You had the same lenses, same lighting. Now, of course, if you change all those other variables, then yeah, of course, you can tell a difference in the image. But my point in saying that is, like, I've done tests. You can go look on the channel, and I've put these two cameras against each other. And it's not mind-blowingly different image quality. Now, what do you get in a cinema camera? Like, why do we have cinema cameras? Cinema cameras do things that mirrorless cameras do not do. Mirrorless cameras shoot to a compressed codec of some kind. Mirrorless cameras might come in 10-bit, 8-bit. You can shoot log, you can get good dynamic range, you can, get all these things, you can get a good image out of it for sure. But what they're not designed for is working on a set. They're not designed for rigging up a lot of accessories. They're not designed for, a proper all-day power solution. They're not designed for, media management, in a team. They're not designed for multiple people to be able to access different parts of the camera, like the fact that this guy has a whole separate screen for the AC with controls and audio over here and, all of these different things. All the ins and outs. It's got SDI ports. It's got time code. Time code is a big one. You can get time code in the FX3, etc. So there's a lot of variables and things that make a cinema camera beyond just the fact that, it shoots RAW. Like, that's great. But there's a lot of other reasons for a cinema camera. There are ergonomic reasons, workflow reasons. Does that mean it's the wrong camera for a wedding? No. Like, I took the giant URSA to a wedding once. I did it to prove a point because everyone kept commenting like, oh, you can't use Blackmagic cameras if you don't have lights. You can only use them on a film set, only use them on a commercial. Not true. And so I took this to a wedding just to prove, no, you can do anything with this. Like, is it stupid? Yes. Is it dumb heavy? Yes. Would I ever shoot a wedding with it again? No. But can you? Yes. Right? Like, you got to understand the capabilities of the tools. In the same way, you can shoot a movie with this. You guys ever see any movie shot with this? Yes. I'm totally blanking now on the name of the movie. But it was a major VFX picture. The guy that made Dune worked on it. Anyway. Wow, why can I not think of the name of this movie? Whatever, it didn't matter. Point is, they made an $80 million movie on the FX3. Can you do it? Yes. Did a lot of people, whine and cry about the fact that they didn't have RAW and all these things? Yeah. But did the movie still look good? Yes. Was it 90% visual effects? Yes. So you can do any of these things with any of these cameras, right? Like the image coming out of the FX3, that's the camera I use. That's my example camera, but insert any camera that you like here, as far as I'm concerned, in the terms of this debate, this camera, the new Lumix camera, the new Canon camera, the new whatever, they're all the same, right? They're all the same. In terms of this conversation, a mirrorless versus a cinema camera. And cinema camera can be any cinema camera in that sense. The Creator, hey, thank you, Arc Studio. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. So that was the film. Creator is the film. Check that out. So that is kind of like the bit of that. So let's talk about some of the benefits you get of RAW versus, say, a 10-bit workflow. Now, I'm talking on the shooting end right now, right? We'll talk about post-production afterwards, but let's just focus on the shooting side of things right now. Overexposure, right? What is the overexposure tolerance? What is the highlight recovery? What is the ability to fix exposure or white balance? That's an equally valid piece of this in post. If you're shooting with an 8-bit camera, which, say 5 years ago was a lot more standard. If you bought a mirrorless camera, it was probably an 8-bit camera. It might have like S-Log2 or some sort of log format, but it's probably 8-bit. In an 8-bit camera, you have very little you can do with highlights, with overexposure, and with white balance correction. It's like you start you go, oh man, we messed up. And you start tinting and just the whole screen turns blue or orange. And you're just like, well, that looks like crap. So when you move to 10-bit and like S-Log 3 or whatever the equivalent, modern, log formats are on the other cameras, 10-bit proper log, you can now get, a 15 stop dynamic range, whatever. It's really 13 or something, but you get a 15 stop dynamic range. You get the ability to make some pretty reasonable adjustments to exposure and white balance. Now, that said, if you clip data, it's gone, right? Like if you overexpose by a stop or two and you blow something out, like it's gone. You can't recover that on 10-bit. And same, on the underexposure side. If your white balance is absolutely the wrong Kelvin, you should have been 32 and you were 56. That's, a 2000 Kelvin shift. You cannot shift that far with 10-bit. You can, I would argue you can probably get 1000 Kelvin in 10-bit before it's like, whereas in 8-bit, it was like you maybe had 400 Kelvin, that you could shift before it was like, what's wrong with this image? So massive improvement over 8-bit. But in RAW, you can now change the white balance from anything to anything. You can be from 2000 Kelvin, 10,000 Kelvin, doesn't matter because the camera, it's capturing the raw data off the sensor. I don't have to get technical. You guys know what RAW is. Same thing with exposure, right? You're capturing the raw data off the sensor, not just the particular ISO, exposure that you're at. You're capturing the full range of the sensor in RAW. That's why the files are stupid big, because you're capturing so much more data. Another thing, that's really important in that is bit depth. I saw this great hour-long video on bit depth that just blew my brain on how it works and the analog to digital conversion and how that chip in most cameras is, limited to ultimately 12 to 13 stops at dynamic range because of the analog to digital conversion that happens. So no matter what your camera specs say, really the data can hold approximately 13 stops at dynamic range, even if it says 15 stops or whatever, unless you have a 12-bit, 14-bit, 16-bit RAW camera, which only cinema cameras have that. None of the, mirrorless cameras have that kind of processing. You're limited to the actual amount of exposure latitude that can be stored. Now, different log profiles can store it, a little bit differently and can kind of, squeeze it a little bit. But there is a actual technical limitation because of the hardware inside of the cameras that limits how much data and dynamic range total can be stored. So anyway, there's that. And that's why, again, I'm just like, mirrorless cameras, cinema cameras are just two different things. And the question is, which one do we use and how do we make that decision? So exposure, if you're shooting RAW on a cinema camera, you actually can fully change that exposure across the entire ISO range of the camera. Now, if you've got dual base ISOs, usually you have to be in whichever base ISO, and then you can move it from there. So, per camera, there's some specifics there, but generally speaking, the theory is you can go the whole exposure range available in the exposure mode that you're in. And that's where you get into dual base ISO or Cine EI or whatever, all that stuff. So exposure tools is another thing. If you have a mirrorless camera, it probably has a histogram on it. You probably have zebras on it. That's probably all you have. For mirrorless cameras, that's generally what's there. I've seen very few mirrorless cameras that have a waveform monitor or false color. I don't think I've seen a single one with false color. Does the Nikon ZR have false color? Now that I remember playing with Mike's ZR, and I think I remember seeing false color on there. So I don't remember. Don't quote me on that. Maybe the ZR does have false. I think the ZR did have a waveform, actually. But generally speaking, again, the ZR is this hybrid cinema camera, mirrorless camera. So it does have things that just punch above its weight class. It's an interesting camera. But if you're looking at, any cinema camera, you're going to have false color. You're going to have, the waveforms, vector scopes. You're going to have, all of those things built into the camera. So that some cameras have EL zone, which is like a special version of false color. Anyway, those are features that you're going to find in a cinema camera. You will not find in a mirrorless camera, generally speaking, broad generalization. Now, you can buy external monitors that have those things, and I highly suggest that you do. Waveform in particular is my favorite exposure method. So Scotty V, Canon C50 has false color. Good job, Canon. Now okay, so now you're talking Canon C cameras. I'm actually not super familiar with all the Canon ones, but the C cameras generally are cinema cameras. Canon C50, I just got to know right now which camera this one is. So generally you get into like the C100, those are technically cinema cameras. And so those do tend to have more cinema features. So, okay, yes. Okay, yeah, this camera. Yeah, so the things like the C50 fall again into that sort of hybrid space where it's like, it's a cinema camera sort of, but it's also a, mirrorless camera. So some of those cameras do have those things. FX3 says cinema line right on it. It's a cinema camera, but it does not have those things. So like I said, broad generalization. If you get a video camera, they also do tend to have some of those things. Whereas just mirrorless cameras tend not to, but ultimately it's just a software thing. They can start enabling those things in software. But what they really, really, really don't have, yeah, see someone's chatting, and I think maybe the new Lumix has false colors. Yeah, so these are software things, and manufacturers can put those things in. They just classically have not on a mirrorless camera. And I think the methodology there is usually they're trying to protect their cinema line by not installing those features on the smaller cameras, so that you still have a reason to buy, a Burano or whatever it is. So yeah, exposure tools, that's a thing. But any $200 monitor from China, will have those tools in it. So it's not the biggest hurdle to overcome. Okay. Speaking of monitors, monitoring, right? Let's talk about that. These kinds of cameras typically have a flip screen, very easy to just turn around. You can film yourself, you can vlog, you can see what's going on. Whereas cinema cameras tend to not have little flippy screens. The URSA Cine 12K LF finally Blackmagic figured out, hey, we can take the screen, we can flip it, and we can twist it, and you can actually see yourself. So that's nice. They finally got that on that beast of a camera. But then you look at like their 6K, which is just a, here, let me grab the 6K. Let me grab the 6K. I keep talking about it. All right, got my half torn apart 6K rig here. But the 6K has a built-in screen on the back. You cannot flip it over. It does, it articulates a little bit, but you cannot, you cannot see yourself. And that's typical for a cinema camera. Too many props. So monitoring yourself is difficult with a cinema camera, generally speaking. Now, another thing to talk about is quality of the screen, LUTs. Can you trust what you see at all? LUTs is a big deal. Most good modern cameras now, you can put LUTs in. And to me, LUTs are critical to a reasonable post-production workflow, right? So I have my own LUTs. The Pocket 6K is awkward. You're right. I've created LUTs for all of my cameras that I like. And I've custom created all of my LUTs. I keep thinking I should offer them I actually do have some of them for sale. If you go to my, whatever, if you want that, let me know. I can get you info on it. But I've created LUTs for all my cameras that I really like. And I take those LUTs, I put them into the camera. So on the FX3, I've got my couple different LUTs that I use in the camera. And whenever I'm shooting, we have a LUT for corporate, we have a LUT for weddings, literally that's it. And I will apply the LUT in camera, look at the screen. I can shoot what you see is what you get on my screen, but I'm recording S-Log3, 10-bit, etc., so that when I get into post, all I do is I take my LUT, I put it onto the footage, And then I might have to make a minor adjustment because I was monitoring what you see is what you get in camera. Instead of trying to monitor a log image and be like, does this look good? Do I have the right? Just slap the LUT on the camera, then slap that LUT on in post, and now you're 95% of the way to a finished image. And all you have to do is be like, oh, the exposure was 1/3 of a stop, this way, or the white balance is just like a little bit off. So you just fix the little things instead of having to sit there and like grade every image. Now, obviously, if we're doing like a higher end commercial project or a film or something, then yeah, you are like grading. But I'm talking about typical workflow on just a typical corporate project, things where it's like, look, they're not budgeting for us to spend a day in a grading suite on this thing. It's like, slap the LUT on, let's go. But we're shooting with that LUT in camera, so we're creating a good image in camera. We're not hoping for the best in post, and then just getting stuck or slapping a LUT and being like, it doesn't look good. Like we're getting a good image in camera. That's like step one, right? I do that on all of my cameras. Blackmagic, Sony, they all have custom LUTs I've created, and I shoot to the LUT, and then I put the LUT on, and then I just make minor tweaks from there. Okay, there is monitoring. Okay, let's talk about menus and speed under pressure, right? Because typically, if you're a solo one-man band guy, which is what we're talking about, that's the focus of this, Sony versus Blackmagic for solo filmmakers. If you are by yourself, every second you fiddle with your camera counts against you because there's so many things that need to happen as you're shooting solo. When that happens, you have to go quickly. And so however your menus are set up, however your custom buttons are set up, however all that is set up, the ability to do that is what helps you move quickly. Then you also have to memorize whatever those things are. Now, the other piece of that is what sort of menu system does the camera give you? Now, I can speak to Blackmagic and I can speak to Sony. I don't really use other cameras anymore, so I can't really speak to, C50s and all these other things because I don't use them. I was gaffing for somebody on a shoot and they were like, hey, can you run this camera, for me for a second? And I was like, sure. And I was like, what is this? Where is it? It was a Canon C70, and I'm like, cool. He's like, show me the buttons. I'm like, great. And I just like start going and I'm just like, where are the buttons on this? I don't know how to operate this camera, and I was just picking up little B-roll shots. It wasn't a big deal. But I was just like, well, I hope that's properly exposed and in focus because I don't know anything about what LUT you're running or what color profile you're in or anything. I'm just like, it was very, very run and gun. And it was just like, here's a camera, go. And I was like, okay, you got the best I could do. Anyway, yeah, I'm just not even going to talk about that camera. Great camera. I don't know how to use it. Menu systems. Someone hands you a camera you don't know. Goodness, how do you use that? The Blackmagic cameras, I will say, I think they have my favorite menu system of any camera. It is super intuitive. It is all touch-based. All the important things are on the screen. You just tap on white balance and move the slider. You tap on exposure and move the slider. You tap on this and move the slider. Like, it's just so easy to use. Like, there are more advanced things, like how you set up all the different frame guides and things and like that. Yeah, you have to know how to do that. But in terms of just basic camera settings, you're like, I don't like this. Touch it and move it. Oh, that was easy. Like, super, super intuitive. Sony has come a long ways in their menu system. Even, in just the firmware updates that the FX3 has had, now the menus are nice. The menus used to be horrendous. We had a Sony FX6 for a couple years, and great camera. It's really just an FX3 in a big body with ND filters and a bunch of buttons. That's my take on it. But goodness, I hated operating that camera because if it wasn't on a physical button, it was like, where is this thing in the menu? And like, there was like, the menu was like 50 screens long and none of it made sense. It was not organized. And every time you had to go look for something, you're like, where is it? No. And then you got to use this dumb little joystick thing. Like, it was just like, goodness, that was a difficult camera to operate. Now, once you had like your 3 buttons you needed and it was just like, click the button and turn the wheel, like that part of it is easy. But anyway, good menu systems are important when you're running solo. Really, that just falls under the heading of get to know your camera really well. More than a specific camera is the winner or loser there. Okay, we've made it through shooting. And just a quick note, if you have questions, pop them in the chat and I'll get to it when I can. So post-production. Let's talk post-production on Blackmagic versus Sony. 10-bit versus RAW. What does that really mean? It means flexibility in post. The short version is 10-bit, you can push, I would argue, as far as you need to if you do a good job in shooting. If you're paying attention to your exposure, your white balance, your image in camera, then when you get in post, you'll have everything you need to make a good image. Like that, just straight up. And I would say same goes for any of the other, similar cameras. Provided you're shooting, S-Log3, 10-bit, you're shooting proper settings and you're getting the camera settings right in post. And you're not like, oh crap, I underexposed by 5 stops. Okay, well, good luck with that. But when you go to a RAW camera, now everything is your paintbrush and you can change any of those things. I have absolutely saved shots that are like, well, good luck with that, because of shooting in RAW. There was a time, even in our wedding business, where we transitioned from shooting all of our weddings on Lumix cameras at the time, like GH4 era Lumix cameras. We transitioned to shooting all of our weddings on pocket 4K cinema cameras, Blackmagic cameras, 100% manual. But those cameras are so fast and easy to operate. They were fairly lightweight, still like ugly and ridiculous like the 6K is. But honestly, it was fantastic. And we got great images out of those cameras. And shooting in 4K at like the craziest compression setting, 18.1 or whatever it was that they gave you, the files were really just about the size of like a 4K ProRes LT file. It wasn't even that bad. File size, and we had the flexibility of RAW, and I can't tell you how many shots at a wedding just like things were crazy and you're just like, you don't have time to set your white balance, you don't have time to set your exposure right, and you're just like, hit record, focus, go, because it's just happening. And that can happen in any kind of run and gun environment, not just a wedding. But the amount of times I was able to go in and save a shot like this is gone, and you're like, whoa, goodness, we can crank the ISO and we can fix the white balance and all these things. Like, look at this shot, it looks fantastic now. So RAW really can save you in post when you screw up on set, or if you just need to make a creative change on set. In filmmaking, it's not about covering screw ups; it's about creativity, right? If you're solo one-man banding it, then it might be about fixing screw ups, and RAW is fantastic for that. I love it. But the reality is file sizes. File sizes, my goodness. You shoot on an FX3 and it's running, 100, 200 megabit, file. You go to the, URSA Cine, and even at, high compression ratios, for the same 4K image, you're still, 5-10 times the file size. It's way bigger. Now, I will say the FX6 also had fairly large file sizes, because I think it was 2 or 3 times the bit rate of the FX3, because it was the like all I intro or whatever it was, and it didn't have an option for anything below that. You couldn't do just like a cheap MP4 or something like you can do on the FX3. FX3 can also do the higher end stuff, but anyway, you only have high-end, high bitrate codecs in a cinema camera, because the manufacturer's like, why would we give you H.264? This is a cinema camera. Like, what the heck are you doing? So that is something to think about. You're only going to get the high-end file sizes and codecs. Now, you get high-quality files. It looks fantastic, but big file sizes. And so that means storage. So you got to really think about that with storage. Like, we'll use 128 gigabyte SD cards in this thing, and we'll maybe go through 1 or 2, on a typical shoot. We've got terabytes for this guy. Even shooting in 4K, we'll blow through a whole lot of data. But if you want to shoot it in 8K or 12K, boy howdy, that is a lot of data. So that's something to think about. File sizes and storage is a big thing. Okay, what else we got in post-production? Post-production, drag. Goodness. When you have bigger, beefier files, you just have to think about the entire drag that makes on post-production, right? Like Blackmagic cameras make proxies in camera, so you get the full RAW and proxies. And if you edit in proxies, editing goes like butter, even on a not very good, like an Apple M1 laptop. You can edit proxies off of a 12K Blackmagic camera, no problem. It'll cut through them like butter because they're small proxy H.265, 4 or 5 files. But as soon as you go to do your online edit, now you're going to bring up the actual RAW. It will start to choke a computer because it's a lot of data, and it's a lot of data fast. It's a high data rate. So your storage has to be up to par. You have to be on SSDs or NVMEs, preferably. You have to have enough storage. You got to have plenty of, power, RAM, all those, nerdy computer things. Your PC, Mac, whatever you're using, Linux, it's got to be powerful enough to process this stuff. Whereas most computers, most laptops can edit files off of an FX3 or, equivalent camera. But I say most, I'm talking like a decent modern one, not like the ones your clients are like, all right, we can't even play our video back. Like, not those kind. Lenovo ThinkPad, but you do have to think about the drag that makes on your post-production. Just your entire process will go slower and everything will take longer. Your renders will take longer, et cetera, et cetera. You gotta just think through the cost of that. Okay, let's see. We've got a comment here. File sizes stop being an issue when you get a solid NAS setup. To be honest, it's worth the trade-off with how much flexibility RAW gives you working solo. Thank you for that. Yeah, I have different opinions on NAS. NAS can work. NAS, network attached storage, that is for, I have a team of people in the same office and we all need to access the same stuff. That's what a NAS is for. Typically a NAS, and by NAS, you might just mean like generically, storage, solutions. NAS in particular tends to run over Ethernet, and that can usually be a slow connection. There is 10 gig Ethernet if you have the proper cards and whatever. It's just a little more expensive to run, but so it just totally depends on your system. Now, I'm talking to solo shooters, which means I'm talking to solo editors. So you definitely need a storage solution, and it definitely should not be using the internal hard drive on your computer. So you most definitely need some sort of bay of drives situation with a fast cabled connection, because again, you have to have speed if you're going to edit, RAW. RAW does give you a lot of flexibility, and it's amazing. And I love shooting RAW, especially if I'm only shooting 4K. As soon as I start shooting 8K, 12K, like the RAW can just really be a lot. It can be a bear to deal with. So, like I just made a short film a couple weeks ago. I decided to shoot an 8K just because I knew we'll be delivering in we'll be putting it up on YouTube in 4K. That's more than enough. 8K is more than enough. File sizes wasn't my concern. I was just thinking like, this can be a lot of footage. It's going to be a lot of stuff. We're going to have to process all this to make this 10-minute short film. And I would rather just deal with 8K files for not only storage, but also just for the whole process, of the edit and the online and all of this stuff. So I decided to go 8K. I do kind of wish I had went 12K just because I can. But ultimately, like what am I going to do? Punch in 3X on something for 4K? Like, no, like I don't need 12K. Nobody needs 12K unless you're shooting like nature documentaries. Whatever. You can use it for whatever you want, right? We feel better using 12K because we have a 12K camera. I shot it in 12K. It feels so cool. But reality is you just do not need that for most things. I frequently shoot the URSA Cine 12K in 4K. I frequently shoot it in 4K, to be honest, because most of this work is for clients. 4K deliverable, they're going to watch it in 1080 or 720 on their phone. Their clients who are watching their video are going to watch it in 1080 or 720 on their phone, on their website, on YouTube, while they're on a bus. Like, shooting it in 12K it's just diminishing returns for the majority of things. Now, of course, if you're like making a movie and it's going to the cinema screens, absolutely do shoot the highest, shoot 17K, like do the highest thing you got because you got to make the best quality, whatever. I'm talking about working for clients. I'm talking about a solo operator. Now, you could argue as a solo operator, hey, 12K gives me all kinds of flexibility, and I can, shoot one wide shot, and I can crop in and get 3 different shots, and that's lazy filmmaking. It can also be efficient. You got to worry about your lens resolution, all kinds of other issues if that's your literal plan. So yeah, 8K is plenty. Amen. Yes. Okay. So post-production drag, we got that taken away. All right. I have really gotten through the majority of stuff that I want to say here. Ultimately, the takeaway for this whole thing is, what are you making? Who's your client? What are you making? That is the question that helps you decide whether you should shoot with a Blackmagic or a Sony or a Red or a Canon or a Potato. Pick anything. What are you doing? Who is it for? Who's going to watch it? Where are they going to watch it? Now, as filmmakers, we love to get gear acquisition syndrome. As filmmakers, we love to get nerdy about our gear. And we love to be like, ooh, I want that new lens. Ooh, that lens is a f9. Ooh, that has anamorphic. Ooh, that lens turns twisty. We love to get into these things. But what you have to think about is return on investment for your business. I say that with an URSA Cine 12K sitting on my desk. So I'm not immune to this. But you have to think about return on investment for your business. Is this a difference your clients will ever see? That depends who your clients are. If you're working for agencies, they're going to request specific cameras. Great. So you need to use the things they're requesting. That matters for that client because the agency is the client. If you're working direct to client, which is 90% of what we do, the client doesn't know or doesn't care. The only thing the client knows is different about these two cameras is one is big. And if your camera is big, then it's expensive. The other thing that I have learned, real life, on set, the difference between this camera and, if you turn the right lever, it helps. I'm trying to take my matte box off of this lens and put it on this lens, because when a client sees, because I loosened the French flag while I was trying to take the matte box off. Come on, guys. You know how this goes. When a client sees a matte box, ooh, that's a cinema camera. That's expensive. We've literally had clients on set. We were shooting, a 2-part thing, and the first part we showed up, we put a matte box on, and we shot. We did all this stuff, and the next day, we just took off the matte box. Literally, there I am loosening the French flag again. We just took the matte box off, and the client literally said, "Is that camera good enough for this?" Literally. Client said that. And we were like, it's the same camera. That's called a matte box. It's just an attachment for the lens, and we didn't need it today. And the entire day, the client was just like, are you sure? Literally over the matte box. So if you want to impress your clients, put a matte box on. It is the honest truth. Okay. All of this takeaway. The difference between a cinema camera and a mirrorless camera, Blackmagic, Sony, pick your camera brands. The difference is speed on set. The difference is control in post. The difference is impression you make with your clients. You can, what we like to say, play dress up. You can play dress up with a small camera all day long, and it still has all the functionality and all the benefits of a small camera. It's lightweight. It's, you can rig this thing up. You can put a cine back on it. You can put a matte box on it. You can put a monitor on top. You put a V-mount battery in the back, and all of a sudden it's the size of a cine camera. And your client doesn't know the heck of a difference between the two things. They're just like, oh, big camera. Cool. This is good. This is legit. So knowing what matters to your client versus what matters to you. Now, of course, if you show up to a wedding with a giant camera, which I've done, you will get people being like, oh, dang, that's expensive. Oh, dang, that's pro. But also you're going to have just as many people being like, that's obnoxious. So think about what you're doing and what's the best suited camera for the task. Okay, what's popping up in the chat here? Funny thing about this business, a fully rigged up FX3 will seem much better than a stripped down red. 100% to a client perception. 100%. They are looking at the size of the camera. They have no idea what any of it does. I mean, I've so many times been like, it would be so funny to just get like a red sticker and just slap it on the side of my FX3 or whatever camera I have. And then the client's like, oh, it's red. Oh, they shoot movies on red. Good client perception, right? And it's like, the truth is, you wouldn't tell the difference between the two images if I showed them to you. Because you're a client, you know, you run your company, you do what you do, you make widgets, you sell, you run a gym, you do whatever it is that you do, you know, you fix air conditioners, you do your thing. You're good at that. You do your thing, you make money. My thing is to make the video. And I see a lot of these funny videos going around on Instagram and stuff where people are making fun of clients and they're, you know, like, oh man, this client has all these crazy requests and all this stuff. And I'm like, no, client, you better F off. And I'm just like, I get that there's things going on in the video industry. And as the video professionals, we have certain feelings and we feel certain ways, but it's like, look, the client pays our bills, like treat them nicely, be kind, and be respectful to your clients. You know, if you're the guy who's out there like just making a bunch of comedic content about how stupid your clients are, like at some point that comes back on you. I don't know where that just came from, but all this about cameras and gear, right? So you can dress a small camera up very easily to look like a big camera. Clients will be equally impressed. If your goal is to impress your clients, don't buy a bigger camera. Just buy some makeup. Buy some accessories for your camera. Put some rails on it, put a matte box on it, throw a follow focus on, throw a monitor on top, and a battery in the back, even if it's not even plugged into anything. And the client will just be like, whoa. Like literally. If you've never done that and you don't believe me, try it. Just try it. It works every time. So if all you want to do is impress a client, just dress up your small camera. Buying a big camera is not going to do it. Yes, in the comments. It doesn't cost as much to dress up, but it means the world to the client. Absolutely. Now, if you have a camera like this, you don't really have to do much dress up with this thing. I mean, you're going to put a matte box on for functionality. And I mean, like, it's already big just by itself. So you don't have to do a lot of dress up. Now, obviously, we're going to put some doodads on there. We'll throw a follow focus on and, you know, I'll probably throw a monitor on top and this and that. And then I'm going to pull out my easy rig to hold the thing because it weighs freaking 15 pounds. And I'm not going to carry that around all day. So now I've got the easy rig. Now I'm the Scorpion King with the giant camera and everyone's like, wow, like, great. Good job. You know, like there are, you know, versus like I have used the easy rig with the FX3, you know, with a few things on it. And I'm like, I just feel kind of stupid holding this relatively small camera on an easy rig. You know, when I had like the, you know, the FX6 and it was rigged up a little bit, it didn't feel ridiculous, but I definitely have felt a little ridiculous doing the FX3 on an easy rig, you know, like it was a little bit rigged up, but it wasn't big. And you're like, I feel like you should just be able to hold that in your hand. So like, maybe the easy rig just makes you look weak at that point, rather than being a flex. So anyway, all these things about gear, Sony versus Blackmagic, they're both fantastic cameras. And the issue is not, are you shooting commercials? Then you should buy a Blackmagic. Are you shooting weddings? You should buy a Sony. Like, that's not really the issue. It's what is your workflow and what things are you doing and what sort of expectations do your clients have? Like, that guides what you do. Now, if you're working direct to client and your projects are, you know, under $10,000, do whatever you want. Like, do whatever you want. Because the client doesn't have the budget to tell you what to do with your gear at that point. You know, obviously if you're working for agencies or things, or back to client, if what you're doing is you're interfacing and working with other crews, then these things do matter again. But if you're working direct to client, meaning business owners, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They're using their phone, and you show up with anything bigger than their phone with a matte box on it, and they think, wow. So, you know, just do the dress up thing. Okay, what do we got in the question? The real question, though, once autofocus comes to the Pix and the Ursa, are you going to keep the Sonys? That is a fantastic question. So I already have beta autofocus on the, I have the full frame 6K. And this guy has beta autofocus. I made a video about it. It's actually not bad. But it's also not production ready, right? Like, oh, it works pretty good 90% of the time. Then it's like, whoa, what was that? So I wouldn't really use it on any kind of serious production. Like if I was doing a gimbal tracking shot and I was like, I don't want to pull this. Let me see if it can just hold. Like I would do that because it's B-roll and I can be like, that didn't work. Let's do it again. And if it didn't work a second time, I'd be like, let's do it one more time. And I just manually focus on the third one. Like I'd be fine with that sort of situation. I'm not going to like take this to a wedding and like rely on autofocus all day. Like it's not there yet. They have made leaps and strides, and frog jumps and all kinds of things. It's gotten very good, very fast. And so I'm excited to see where it will go. What I have heard on the internet, so I know it's true, is that the sensor of this guy is a specific sensor, and that sensor has autofocus capabilities on it because it was designed for... Well, it's a Sony sensor. It's designed for Panasonic or somebody. Like I think it's the same sensor that's in the new Lumix S, whatever, something to that effect. But the sensor has autofocus. The Cine 12K sensor is a completely different sensor. My understanding is there's no autofocus in this sensor, so I don't think autofocus will come to the Cine 12K, short version. But even if it did, I would not sell the Sonys, to answer your question. I would keep the Sonys and I would keep the Blackmagics. Last year, when they did the price drop on the body-only kit for the URSA Cine 12K, which is what I bought, we had seen it at NAB the previous year, and I was like, that's fantastic, that's amazing, that is a ridiculous beast, I will never buy that. And then when they dropped the body-only kit, I was like, oh, man, the image quality on this camera for the price, I was just like, there's no way I can pass this up. And so I bought it. And we used to be, I've used all kinds of cameras. I used to run all Blackmagic cameras. And then we bought into Sony cameras for the wedding and event side of the business that was very, very busy at the time. We're talking like 2021-ish. We're very, very busy in weddings and events. And it just kind of made sense to switch to the Sony cameras because most people were using them. And it made it really easy to crew up because it could be like, cool, bring your Sony and it'll match and you already know how to use it. I was previously using Lumix cameras, which nobody uses Lumix cameras, apparently. And so I was like, these are fantastic cameras, especially for the price. And so I knew how to use them and I thought they were great. And everyone I showed it to was just like, it's like old grandpa syndrome. And so I decided we're going to go Sony for the wedding and event side of the business because it makes it way easier to find other videographers and second shooters and crew up and yada, yada. And so we did. And I eventually was just like, these Sony cameras are actually so dang good. At the time, I was down on Blackmagic cameras. I had like 5 or 6 of the Pocket 4Ks. They were fantastic. They had B-RAW. They're great, but they're limited to 13 stops of dynamic range. And I just felt like I was kind of hitting the limit on what they could do for us. And I realized the Sonys could do everything those cameras could do. And so I ended up selling all of my Blackmagic cameras, switching completely to Sony. We picked up a Sony FX6 because I was like, I kind of missed the big camera for impressing clients and yada, yada. So we had a slew of Sony cameras. And then I went back to Blackmagic when I got the Cine 12K. And I was like, that's it. I'm going back to Blackmagic. I'm selling my Sonys. We're going all in on Blackmagic. And I got the URSA in, started using it, and I was like, I forgot how big and heavy this thing is because I got so used to the small FX3. And I picked up the 6K full frame to be a B cam for the Sony, or for the 12K. That way, when we did corporate interviews and stuff, we could have 2 cameras that were B-RAW and matched and cut in and whatever. And then a small camera I can put on a gimbal because we do a whole lot of gimbal work here. And you can't put the 12K on any reasonable gimbal. Like I'm not buying a $5,000 gimbal and a ready rig just so I can fly that camera. So all that said, I was like, I'm switching to Blackmagic, and I bought all the Blackmagic stuff, and then I started selling my Sony stuff. I sold my FX6, I sold some lenses, I put my FX3 up for sale. I was like, I'll keep my FX30, which is what I'm streaming on, because it's, you know, fantastic, it's cheap, and it has this cool USB-C webcam function that I'm using. And so I was like, I'll keep the FX30 and a couple lenses, and I'll sell everything else. So I started selling everything, and I had the FX3 up for sale. Someone was going to buy it, and they just waited to buy it. They were like, I'll buy it, and then just waited to pay for it. And in that couple weeks I was waiting for them to get the money, I realized how much I loved the FX3. And so then I, had to call him back and be like, sorry, let me refund your deposit. I'm keeping this camera. I can't sell it. And that's just going to remain true. The FX3 fills a hole that the Blackmagics do not fill. Even if the 6K got perfect autofocus, I would keep the FX3. Because the FX3 fills a different niche. It has dual base ISO, very, very good low light performance, amazing low light performance. The 6K is abysmal in low light. Like, it just straight sucks in low light. The Cine 12K is actually pretty good in low light. I was very impressed. It's the best low light performance of any Blackmagic camera ever made, by like at least a stop, like by a wide margin. It's actually like, wow, this is competitive. It's not a Sony, it's not a low light beast. You're not going to shoot in the moonlight or anything, but it's actually very surprisingly good for a cinema camera. But even if all these cameras had autofocus, I would not get rid of the Sonys, because the Sonys fill other boxes beyond just autofocus. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question. That actually brings me to a whole nother point that I thought about talking about, and since we're kind of at the end of the live, I'll just talk about it. I didn't make an outline for this this part. The way you shoot is affected by the way you think, right? And so it's a chicken and egg thing, right? Like, am I shooting with a cinema camera, or am I shooting with a autofocus mirrorless camera with a zoom lens? It's two different ways of thinking. And when you shoot a certain way, you think a certain way. But also, when you think a certain way, you shoot a certain way. So it's like a total chicken and egg thing. And when you make certain gear choices, that goes in line with the ways of shooting. So a cinema camera with prime lenses, cinema lenses, is its own workflow, its own process, its own way of shooting, which becomes its own way of pre-production, because you're thinking about lenses, you're thinking about shots. It's very intentional process. Whereas on I'll just call it videographer, that's just kind of my term for solo, one-man bands, zoom lens, gimbal, like I just call it videographer. I don't mean weddings specifically, I just mean, you're kind of running and gunning with a zoom lens and autofocus. And usually a gimbal, not always a gimbal. That is a different thought process for shooting. It's a very, I'll call it fluid, a very fluid process. You're in the moment and you're just moving, you're just going. And you're like, I want to be here. I want to be here. I want to be here. It's instant, right? It's like the closest thing you can get to like iPhone filmmaking, but with quality, right? Because everything is just click, 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 boom, I'm there. Now, of course, you can use prime lenses and other things, but I'm just talking about that sort of zoom lens, run and gun approach. It's very, very immediate. And you're able to zoom with your feet. You can zoom with your lens. You don't have to predetermine decisions. And so your decisions become on-the-fly decisions. There are pros and cons to all of that. But it's a different level of intentionality than when you have this big, heavy beast, and you're like, I know that I have to be intentional about moving this thing. I know that I'm on a prime, I'm on a 65 right now. I have to decide what I'm shooting. Do I need to be on a 65? Should I be on a 100? Should I be on a 45? Should I be on a 24? What should I be on? And it's manual stop. What stop should I be at? Manual focus. Should I focus on this? Should I focus on that? It gives you a level of intentionality that when your camera is, is zooming in and out, it's autofocusing for you. It's doing all these things. On one hand, yeah, it frees you up to make creative decisions because the camera's doing technical decisions. But on the other hand, when you have to make those technical decisions, they're also creative decisions. And so there's something I love about the cinema workflow. And then there's something I love about the videographer workflow, right? Each shoots different things. If I'm shooting a wedding, I don't want the cinematographer workflow. I want the videographer workflow because it's better for that purpose. The day just continues to move and it doesn't stop for you to change lenses. And so you just have to be really fast at changing lenses and hope you don't drop anything. Or you're going to miss a shot. Or you're going to be on the wrong lens because you didn't have time to change it. Or as you're finding focus, the moment happens. What sold me on the wedding side of the business of going to Sony was when I tested and found that the autofocus was faster and more accurate than I was. And I was pretty good at manual focus. And when I was testing it and I realized this thing can go from tight on the groom to tight on the bride coming down the aisle and hit focus faster than I can find it, win. That's the right tool for the job. So it just depends what you're shooting and what you're doing and what you need. Those things that make Sony a win for, a wedding or a corporate event or, don't make those things make the Blackmagic not a win. But I've seen wedding filmmakers, just to use that as an example, who shoot on Blackmagic, who shoot on URSAs, big Blackmagic cameras, and they bring the rigs and they bring the stabilizers and they do all that stuff. And I'm just like, dang, to me, that's just total overkill. But I digress. That's a lot of things. So shooting Sony and Blackmagic, it's a way of thinking. It's a way of life. It's a way of approaching a project just as much as it's a technical choice of which cameras, which lenses you're using, which then turns into a technical thing about what are we dealing with in post-production, which turns into ultimately a creative output of the final piece. You can apply the same thinking process to either one. You can shoot all prime lenses on a Sony camera and use the same thinking process. You can do any of that. You can put a zoom lens on a Blackmagic camera. You don't get autofocus, but you can put a zoom lens on there. I mean, on the 6K, yeah, you can put a zoom lens with autofocus and get that. So, yeah. Anyway, okay, I've talked for a long time. I feel like I've talked about Blackmagic and Sony to death. I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this puppy up. I hope this was helpful to you guys. And I hope that there were some good takeaways in there. Blackmagic versus Sony is always a raging debate on the internet. I find it kind of funny because to me, it's just like they're different. It's apples and oranges. You can't really compare the two. And the people who love one hate the other, right? And so I love the fact that on my channel, I deal with both Sony and Blackmagic because you get people who are on both sides of the fence who feel very passionate that their side of the fence is the right one. And it's just like, guys, it doesn't matter. What's right for the project? What's right for the client? What's right for the end result? It's not that, like, yes, the URSA Cine 12K makes a better image than an FX3. Yes. How much better? Not a lot. Do clients know the difference? No. Will an agency know the difference? Maybe. They'll know the difference on set. Will they know the difference in final result? Well, yeah, if you're giving them a 12K deliverable versus a 4K, then yeah. But if you just showed them two finished graded images side by side, the agency's not even going to tell. Like, unless they have like a DP, on staff or something who's like a total image expert. Like, yes, the images are fantastic out of the Cine 12K. And they're fantastic out of the FX3. And you can, with good grading, good lighting, all the other things that matter, you can make any of those images sing. And I don't regret any of the images that I made on the FX3 or the FX6 or the FX30 and all the time I was on Sony. I'm like, obviously, if you're shooting something and you don't have control, that's a whole different situation. But like when we had control, we were able to light it, we were able to grade it, we were able to make it look good. I don't regret those images. They look great. I also love the images that come off the URSA. The color science baked into the URSA versus the color science baked into Sony, of course, Blackmagic is superior. I'm sticking my claim right there. But by the time you're done grading, etc., like who can tell, right? Like, to me, that is just the biggest thing. We have just really entered this era in camera technology where it's diminishing returns. Every new camera, it's diminishing returns. Like all the cameras, modern cameras, any new camera that's out on the market that you can buy brand new, that's, you know, come out in the last year, all of these cameras at a certain price level, obviously I'm not talking about $600 consumer cameras, like any of the cameras that people like us are using, all of them are capable of making a fantastic image. They've all got good enough dynamic range, good enough this, that, and the other thing. And they can all shoot log, 10 bits, 4K or higher. Like, what more do you need? Like, there's no excuses at that point. Like, if your image sucks, it's not your camera's fault. So the idea that, like, I don't like how it looks, I need to buy a Blackmagic, I need to buy a red, like, it's not going to fix it. Sure, it'll be 5% better or something. It's the kind of better that only people like us will notice, right? It's not the kind of better that a client will notice. Now, if you're on like a 10-year-old camera, then sure. But, you know, buy anything modern and you'll make that jump. So I hope that this has been helpful. Yeah, I'm going live every week, Wednesday, 11 a.m. I don't know if I said that on my last live. Every week, Wednesday, 11 a.m., going live. So I'll be back again next week with a different topic. I'll release the topic the next couple days. So I'll be back again. Talking about whatever we come up with. And obviously as questions come up, you know, in the comments and things, I'd love to address those. And, you know, as questions and topics come up, I'll be addressing those in lives. So I've gone through like all my YouTube comments and like see like what are things people are interested in stuff. And those are my topics I'm pulling up. So Blackmagic Sony is a big topic that comes up, especially for solo shooters. And so that was the first one I decided to tackle. Yeah. So any other questions, put them in the chat or leave comments on the video. This live will be available later. And appreciate you guys all watching, all 100,000 of you that tuned in for this live stream. Appreciate it. And have a fantastic rest of your day. I will look forward to seeing you guys next week. And we'll talk more about filmmaking and corporate video production, business. I mean, there's so many things we can talk about. So many things we can talk about here on this show. Adios. Helps if I actually hit the end button, not the pause screen button. But I just wanted you guys to see the dinosaur one more time because, you know, Jurassic Park's all good and stuff.